Hi, everybody. This is our presentation on Family Preservation Services by Morgan, Haley, Thonvi, Lauren, and Marissa. So we're first going to get into what is Family Preservation Services. Family Preservation Services are short-term family-focused services designed to assist families in crisis. This is achieved by improving parenting and family functioning while keeping the primary goal of children's safety and keeping families together. Intensive family preservation services are similar, where they carry the same characteristics of FPS, but to a more extreme level. Families are provided intensive in-home crisis intervention, counseling, and life skills education for families who have children at imminent risk of placement in state-funded care. The goals of IFPS are to prevent unnecessary out-of-home placement of children through intensive on-site intervention and to teach families new problem-solving skills to prevent future crises. So these are some caseworker demographics. In IFPS, there are about 2 to 3 clients per caseworker, and the average salary for a caseworker is $46,500. 90.5% of caseworkers are female, while 9.5% are male, and 65.9% of caseworkers are white identifying, 17.8% are Black, 9.6% are Hispanic, and 2% are Asian. And in terms of the age distribution, 15% are 20 to 30 years old, 25% are 30 to 40 years old, and 60% are 40 years old or above. And in terms of earnings, women earn 97 cents for every $1 earned by men. So setting an impact, caseworkers often work where the clients are and where the problems need to be solved. This often means working in the client's home or other places in the community where they are. For the intensive family protective services client specifically, services with caseworkers usually only last 4 to 6 weeks, but get 40 to 50 hours worth of direct services since they work with only a couple of clients at a time. And often due to the time-sensitive immediate services needed, caseworker for the intensive family protective services are always on call for clients 24/7. And this means like meeting needs such as food, clothing, shelter, counseling, or other advanced therapeutic techniques. Families are always given as much time as they need when they need it. This accessibility always allows close monitoring of potentially dangerous situations. Okay, so social workers in the field. When we began the process of trying to find a social worker with experience in this practice area, we started by understanding what kind of professionals we were looking for. Our group outlined that we certainly needed someone who either worked in the child welfare area, or family preservation services area, as oftentimes these two sectors intersect. But we also decided it wasn't necessary to have someone who worked directly with CPS or FPS or IFPS, as there are non-government affiliated organizations who do the same work, or consultants for government when the government is able to is unhelpful in certain matters. We also wanted an individual who has experience working personally with clients and could share client narratives, as that is the most guiding research for social workers and social work as a profession. We wanted our interview to be able to disclose situations and contextualize clients without disclosing any confidential information or privy details. Based on this information, we reached out to a couple of groups of people. The first group we thought of were therapists, professionals who were licensed social workers and formerly field workers. These would have been professionals that people in our group had worked with and known on a personal level. The other two groups we reached out to were UT social work faculty and UT social work students in the master's and doctoral programs. Ultimately, we reached out to a doctoral student at the Steve Hicks School of Social Work. So her name is Nicole Kim. She has a master's in social work. Her pronouns are she, her, hers, and is currently a doctoral student here at the Steve Hicks School of Social Work. So these are some of the questions we asked her during the interview. And during this interview, we learned that Nicole is licensed as a foster parent. She became licensed after undergrad. because she had learned that a lot of horrible things happen within the system. She did this for a year and a half and decided to become a caseworker after this. She did analysis after her master's and worked in federal oversight to show all the issues in the system and addressed how to fix them. Right now, she primarily works with parents. She has never worked for CPS, but what drew her attention to child welfare and family preservation was that the fact that there are so many kids in the system and we need to open up more homes. So she always wondered what we could do to prevent this since it wasn't talked about a lot. She also discussed how severe abuse was seen and also saw how certain kids were in the system, but not necessarily because of bad parenting, but because of the level of discrimination. And that's discussed more in our intersectionality part. The one thing she said she would change about the child welfare system is the children getting taken out of their homes due to poverty, due to housing poverty and food poverty. Nicole continued to explain that she didn't see positive accounts when it came to her clients' voices being heard. She believes that having youth being involved in projects that implement policies that deal with them is really important. Her work focuses on a macro level of creating policy for family reunification and also focuses on disparity and systematic reunifications. And on a meso level, she builds the bridge between clients and overturn policy and collaborating with people. Nicole's typical setting for work as a case varies as a caseworker, but mostly she's in office, but she also describes settings such as hospitals, prisons, courts, computers. Nicole's work involves strength perspective by helping parents and children focusing on support and not tearing them down.
Client's perspective. How has family preservation services been helpful? In a case study of 20 parents, they were asked that question and their responses varied. One of the answers included that social workers were emotional support people, listening to them and their side of the story, normalizing the help of FPS while getting rid of the negative connotation that comes with it, and empowering them. Responses also included that social workers were advocates for their clients, providing mediation between parents and other family members, teaching and coaching them parenting skills and referring services that would just provide help. Overall, they were just concrete support for the parents. The only negative I was able to find was that the referrals were either too late, too expensive, or just not helpful at all to them. In another case, 10 parents were asked multiple questions. How have FPS improved your family? How has it changed your family? Most of the responses to these questions have overlapped a lot. They thought the FPS helped improve the communication skills between the parents and their kids, allowing them to have less stress and fewer arguments, improving parenting skills. They learned healthier ways for disciplining their kids, giving them faith in the system again. Most parents have been through multiple family services systems. Parents also said that they felt they had a sense of control over their situation again. Parents reported that FPS changed their family by teaching them to be a parent as a team and giving them a sense of optimism for their future. In the same case of 10 parents, they were asked what was the most important part of FPS services and what was your overall experiences. Families said that the time spent with the therapist was one of the most important parts of the FPS services. They were able to learn new behaviors which would help them model appropriate behaviors for their children. Another part of FPS services that parents reported was that again is bringing back faith in the system. Parents said the services were overall effective and the dynamic of their families has changed for the greater. Issues. Ethical issues. While FPS main objective is to help families to remain together and they do everything in their power, the ethical issue that could arise is determining whether or not that child would be safe in that family entirely. While your job is to preserve the family, your ethical duty is to protect the child if it's not safe. It is a power struggle on what to do. An example of this happening would be Gabriel Fernandez case in 2014. He was murdered by his mother, Pearl Fernandez, and her boyfriend, despite multiple calls about abuse. Family preservation services were called in LA County to try to keep Gabriel with his siblings and their relative, but they constantly ignored the signs that Gabriel was being abused, and they just listened to his mother and said when she said she was not abusing him.
I'm going to be going over the disparity, discrimination, and oppression seen in family preservation services. So to begin, families of color are disproportionately represented in the child welfare system as a whole. What this could mean, these are just a few examples. This could mean children of color are more likely to experience multiple placements. They're less likely to be reunited with their birth families, more likely to experience group care, less likely to establish a permanent placement, and more likely to experience poor social, behavioral, and educational outcomes. So, with this information, you just kind of wonder why this is happening. So, in 2019, the American Bar Association did a report on race and poverty bias in the child welfare system, and they identified 5 primary factors that explain the evidence of disproportionality and disparity surrounding these racial groups and low-income families in the welfare system. So these primary factors are listed right here. The correlation between poverty and maltreatment, visibility or exposure bias, limited access to services, geographic restrictions, child welfare professionals knowingly or unknowingly letting their personal bias impact their actions or decisions. So again, this just kind of goes back to everything we talked about in class about how the system as a whole was not built for people of color. It was built to serve white people. And that's seen in the limited access to services, the visibility and exposure bias, the geographic restrictions. It's just every single detail of like, where are these services located and who's living around where these services are, like what were these built for? Who were these built for? If you start looking at that, the answer is rarely that they were built for people of color. And then just, we've talked a lot in class about how as a social worker, it's our duty kind of to look within ourselves and start rewiring ourselves and relearning the horrible racist things that society has kind of embedded within us so that we can serve people without a knowing or unknowing bias driving our actions and decisions. So I also put this little chart on here. I thought this was really important to show because it compares the child population by race compared to the children in foster care by race. So if you look at it, non-Hispanic whites, the yellow part of the circle, those make up 50% of the entire child population, but they only make up 44% of children in foster care. Obviously, 44% is still so much, but in the broad image, if you look at it, at the end of the day, there are less white children in the foster care system than there are in the entire population. I can't say the same for non-Hispanic Black children. If you look at that, they make up 13% of the child population by race, but they make up 22% of children in foster care. That's almost a 10% increase. So clearly that's an issue. It's an issue that there are more Black children in the foster care system than there are proportionately in the entire child population. Also, the American Indian and Alaskan Native children didn't even account for 1% of the population. Those are, where are they? Oh, here they are. It's that little orange sliver. I don't know if you can even see that. But they make up 2.4% of children in foster care. That's insane. Like, they don't even make up 1% of the entire population, yet they are 2.4% in the child foster system as a whole. So that's obviously an issue. And then Hispanic and Asian children are both underrepresented in the child welfare system. I'm not even sure. Oh, yes, here they are. So they make up 5% of the entire population. It's that little teal color right there. But then only 73% in the children in foster care system. Obviously that's good that there are less in foster care, but still, if you're just looking at it proportionately, there is clearly an issue going on here. And And so that just kind of shows the disparity, discrimination, and oppression seen in child welfare system and family preservation services as a whole.
So now I'm going to talk about intersectionality. Um, like Nicole mentioned in her interview, she said that a lot of times families were separated not because of bad parenting, but because of a level of discrimination. And she also touched on the fact that children were taken out of their homes due to instances like poverty when it comes to food and housing. So just to recap real quick, intersectionality, it was a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. A definition for it is that it's a framework for understanding how social identities overlap across systems of discrimination and privilege. So these identities, especially in instances of family protection, can include sexual orientation, financial status, race, gender, and all of this can contribute to the discrimination that occurs within the system. And so Nicole shared a story with us about how there's an overlap of women who are underprivileged financially and discrimination they face. She shared an example of how one time she witnessed a mother giving birth, and as soon as that mother gave birth, that baby was taken away from her, simply because she wouldn't be able to afford like food for that baby. Another thing that she shared is oftentimes babies are taken away from their mothers because mothers can't afford formula, because they aren't able to breastfeed enough. So these are examples of the intersectionality that occurs between gender and financial status and all of this. And beyond this example, there is so much more that occurs when it comes to race, sexual orientation, and more.
I'm going to be sharing some learning points from this project. Number one, the NCSL has identified 29 enacted bills from 19 states since 2001 that are related to child welfare and disproportionality. Two, most family preservation caseworkers are women. Three, intensive family preservation services draw on four major theories for articulating ideal service delivery systems and treatments: the crisis intervention theory, family systems theory, social learning theory, and ecological theory. Four, family preservation services are short-term, family-focused services designed to assist families in crisis by improving parenting and family functioning while keeping children safe. A surprising 70 to 80% of Americans consider their families dysfunctional. While violence, abuse, and neglect are common forms of dysfunction, many families reported feelings of estrangement, emotional disconnection, and non-traditional family structures as well. This has led to the development of family preservation services to strengthen the community and ensure safe environments for children.
This is our bibliography. We really hope you enjoyed our presentation and learned a lot about Family Protective Services. Thank you so much.